Hi, I'm Lindsay from Lindsay Elliott Coaching, and I wanted to talk today about the recent Victoria Beckham documentary, which I finished watching at the weekend, because there was something right at the end in the final episode. In fact, it was the closing scene of the whole documentary, that really, it fascinated me that the documentary makers ended it that way, and also just really spoke to me because it's the heart of the work that I do. So at the end of the scene, there's a scene between Victoria and David, and they're sitting on their veranda at home. And the essence of the conversation is about how driven Victoria still is in terms of her ambition and her career. And David is kind of asking her, well, what do you have left to prove? I think it's that, you're still so driven because you just don't feel good enough. And who are you trying to prove it to? And she then replies and says, well, I think I'm trying to prove it, to you, to my family. And then David ends with saying, I actually think you're trying to prove it to yourself. And I just thought that it's such a fascinating thing to see in action. And I'm using this as an example, more like an archetype, okay? I'm not directly talking necessarily about Victoria Beckham. I don't want this to be a video about Victoria Beckham. I don't want this to be a criticism of Victoria Beckham, which it absolutely is not. I'm going to use her as our kind of archetypal example of someone who has lots of outward success, certainly lots of fame, and looks like they have a life that lots of us would imagine feels a certain way, and yet underneath all of that is still some sense of not feeling good enough, which that's the point of using her, because she is someone who has received an intense amount of external criticism that I would imagine is definitely compounding this sense that I think all of us have, is some level of, am I good enough? Am I doing enough? What's my worth? What's my value? And particularly in our society these days, it's something that seems to be endlessly talked about. And for Victoria, the added element is she has had some of the fiercest, most awful negative criticism thrown at her that has no doubt influenced her thoughts and her beliefs about herself. So I just want to be really categorically clear that I am in no way criticising Victoria in this video, because I have no wish to put any woman down or to judge any woman. I am only using her as an example of what I think we all go through, and just to use her as a demonstration, really, because I happen to admire her, and I think that the criticism that she has faced is completely unjust and unfair. But what I want to point out in her story is that I imagine, as I said, many of us might look at her life and think she has it all. So she looks a certain way, she has a certain husband who looks a certain way, she's got 3 great kids, she's got lots of money, she's got some successful businesses, she lives in a beautiful home, she has a loving, supportive family. And so we could look at her from the outside and think, well, surely she must feel good about herself. Surely she must feel okay and like she's good enough and that she has value and worth in the world. But at the end of the documentary, they absolutely say the opposite of that is true. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't many things that Victoria is incredibly proud of and someone in her position is incredibly proud of. But what we can see in this is that, and this is how life is working, this is why it's so obvious in this example, is that no amount of outside achievement is affecting how she feels inside. Now, it might affect it slightly, but there's something in there where there's thoughts and beliefs that are being believed, and no amount of achieving things in the outside world is going to change that until there's some kind of internal shift in what you believe about yourself. Now, I know that the conditioning is incredibly strong in our society that says, get the car, get the house, get the money, get the successful business or career, get the right body, and you will be happy and you will feel good enough. I know that that conditioning is incredibly strong, but it doesn't mean that it's going to work. And it doesn't mean that that is how life is working. Because the truth of what's happening is we have our external world, which has a variety of different circumstances in it, and then we have our own internal response to that. And all the time, in any given moment, thought is the thing that is creating our reality about our circumstances. And thought is the thing that creates our reality about how we view ourselves. Now, a lot of it is subconscious or unconscious and not within our control. And we'll also have all of that stuff that we are aware of, that we can hear when our mind is praising us, or when it's berating us, or when it's criticising us. But what I really want to make clear here, and this is why Victoria is a great example of this, is no amount of chasing the outside achievements is the thing that is going to change how you feel about yourself and whether you feel good enough or not. Because good enough, the feeling of good enough or the feeling of not good enough, is a psychological emotional experience. It's held up here in the mind. It's constantly flowing all the time. The mind is saying, you're doing well, you're not doing well, you're succeeding, you're failing, you're this, you're that. All the time it's talking about us. And this is where the psychological emotional experience of feeling enough is held. And no amount of change in the outside world, achieving certain circumstances, actually affects this flow. What affects this flow is seeing that it isn't the truth, is seeing that it is not talking about how well we're doing, about our good enoughness, because our good enoughness is innate. It's built into us. It's something that we are whole and complete all of the time. And it's only for believing our thinking that takes us away from that. And in this example with Victoria Beckham, why I'm using her is because she, if we look at someone else, you might be able to say, well, yeah, they don't have the car or the great career or the kids or whatever. She looks like she's got it all, okay? But still there's something being believed in her mind that says she's not good enough, and she's still got something to prove. Now, when we can really see this clearly, that this whole, am I good enough question is only ever held in our thought. It is not in the essence of who we are. That doesn't mean that we have to give up having dreams. It means we have to give up creating the stuff that we want to create in the world. No, we can still go out there and create a beautiful life that is ours and that we want to live. But the difference is we're doing it not believing that it's going to make us feel okay, not believing that it's going to finally answer that question, am I good enough? Do I have value in the world? Do I need to do more? No, it's never going to answer those questions, because the answer to that question is you already have that. You are already whole, but for believing your mind that takes you away from it, and all of the insecure thoughts and feelings about how you need to fix yourself, and you've got to continually work on yourself, and you've got to be doing better. So we can absolutely be forces in our own lives for the things that we want. But the truth of it is that is not going to be the thing that's going to affect how we feel about ourselves and our sense of whether we're good enough. And then the last point that I want to make is also right at the end of the documentary, as I said, David points out that he thinks that it's Victoria's actually trying to prove it to herself that she's good enough. And this is actually incredibly key, because it can look like we need other people to approve of us. It can look like that's going to be the thing that's going to help us to feel good enough and to finally feel okay. But again, that's an external thing again. Someone else's approval is external to you, much like a car or your job or your family. The only thing that really matters is what is going on in your own internal belief system, because that's the thing that you get to feel moment to moment to moment, your own thought stream about yourself. Now, you can't control that, but you also don't have to believe it. You don't have to get hooked into all of the thinking that says you've got to keep pushing, you've got to keep proving, you've got to get away from this feeling that there's something wrong with you. Because as I've said, the truth is there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. Nothing that needs fixing, nothing that needs improving, but for believing your mind. And at the end of the day, David makes a really good point, that the only person, the only experience that really matters in terms of how you feel, whether you feel good enough about yourself, is your own. That is the only place from which that truth can come. It cannot come from other people's approval or disapproval. It cannot come from the outside life circumstances. So I hope this video has been helpful if not feeling good enough is something that you are struggling with. And yeah, and do check out my resources, which I'll put below, because I've got a great book called The Freedom of Being Enough, and also a coaching program that goes along with that. And yeah, I would love to work with you on this if you feel so called. Okay, thanks so much for watching. Bye.